we are going to do a simple prompt here. So first I'm going to draw a region card. Ooh, we've got a bayou. Now I'm going to draw a landmark card. A village in the bayou or a gorge? Ooh, that's a hard choice. I'm going to go with village for now. All right, we're going to draw a namesake card. We have without fear, holy, last, and on the road to nowhere. I kind of like the idea of the last bayou. Ooh, or the village without fear. I'm gonna go with the village without fear. And in fact, I'm gonna draw an extra namesake card just because I do want to know more about the bayou of outcasts. Now I'm gonna draw an origin card to give a backstory here. Built as a prank, site of a famous negotiation, founded by outcasts. That makes sense for the bayou, but it's almost too obvious. Shaped by an earthquake. I like the idea that the village was built as a prank. And now we're going to draw an attribute card. Values collective responsibility. Rich in folklore. Known for fashion. Or headquarters of a crime family. Collective responsibility might be really important to the survival of the village, so I'm going to go ahead and put that down. I also like the idea that if it started as a prank and it became something more responsible, that there's some kind of a transition story there. Let's go with an advent card now. An enemy nation is converging for war. A rebel group is setting up a stronghold. I definitely like the idea that an enemy nation is starting to invade the bayou. Yeah, I like my village decision. The gorge would have been interesting, but this is definitely working out nicely. So I would interpret this prompt, I mean, there's a lot of ways you can do it, but I really like the idea that the bayou of outcasts pre-existed the village. Like maybe there was this swamp where when people fell through the cracks of society in a nearby area, they would be banished to the swamp, or they'd go to the swamp because it was the only place that was safe, or the only place where they wouldn't be judged, and this had been happening for a long time. I like the idea that the village without fear was something that was started on a lark, like almost as a joke, where somebody who was either going to be banished or was like sick of trying to maintain their status in the society of the nearby town, decided like, hey, I'm just gonna go start a whole new town in the bayou, and it'll be judgment free and we'll be able to do whatever we want there. So they started the village without fear, where they were sort of past fear of social mores, past the fear of banishment, and it was done as a joke at first, or like maybe almost as performance art. They were trying to make a social point, but it turned out to be successful. But of course, for this village to survive, everyone needs to pitch in, and so there's a really big emphasis put on valuing valuing collective responsibility, because it's the only way that the village can keep going is if everyone's working together. And they're in the middle of this bayou that otherwise had been abandoned. An enemy nation is converging for war. It'd be really interesting if the original city or the original nation or kingdom that was banishing people here is now deciding like, oh no, they're gaining too much power and it's time to invade. And that seems like a good excuse to make up a neighboring area. A lot of the cards do this. They will create connective tissue politically or socially or historically with another part of your world. It kind of forces you to look at how these areas would interact and not just treat each of these micro settings in isolation, but to make sure that they have, you know, roots that interconnect in a very organic way. We're going to draw a region card. Mountains, interesting. Landmark card. I like the idea of a museum. We'll pull a namesake card. The Museum of Stocks, the Mountains of Stocks, the Half Mountain. Oh, I like that. The Half Museum. The High Museum, the High Mountains. The Mountain That Weeps. Ooh, I really like the Mountain That Weeps. Maybe it has a season of like meltwater where a lot of the ice thaws, and there's just seasonal like avalanches and floods, like these really wet avalanches. All right, former capital of an empire, site of a pivotal battle, founded by two siblings, or origin of an ancient plague. I kind of like the idea of the origin of an ancient plague, because I like the idea that the meltwater maybe releases something, or there's something ancient that's thawing from it, and it could be released again. Let's look at an attribute card. Known for scholars, known for spices, known for distinctive footwear, home of a titan of industry. That it's like a spice museum. Lastly, I'm going to draw an advent card. They may have to cancel their annual festival, or two rival sports teams are about to face off. Let's go with the annual festival. I like the idea that the museum has an annual spice festival or something. We have a museum in the mountains, and I like the idea that the mountains are just generally pretty occupied and habitated. There's homes all over and villages all over. And these are the mountains that weep. So they're known for these sort of seasonal floods that happen because of the seasonal melt when things warm up and a lot of the ice on the mountain starts to melt. They have seasonal waterfalls and rivers that are frozen sometimes and thawed others. I also like the idea that somewhere up in the mountains there's this reservoir or something where the contaminant that caused the ancient plague was, and it's very rare that things get warm enough to thaw that high, but where there is still some remnant of that ancient plague that people have lost their immunity to that's frozen up there and just waiting for the right day to thaw and come down and join the water sources that people draw from. That would also likely flood into the bayou, which would be, a low-lying waterlogged area. So at some point it would affect here too. The area is known for spices. The museum in particular is a museum of spices, not just things that you look at, but things that you'd actually go and taste and smell. I think that'd be neat. And there's an annual spice festival they might have to cancel, maybe because the flood water is particularly bad, maybe because the ancient plague could be something that comes back. These are very open-ended. There's lots of ways to read them. If you ever have a prompt you don't like, you can just pull it out and scrap it and draw a new one. It's meant to create interaction between areas. A lot of the prompts will suggest that. You can also always look at the different prompts and find ways to connect them if you want to. So canceling the annual festival could happen because they have an interaction with another nearby culture, and there's a bigger priority. So it might be that them flushing out the bayou during war or getting ready to raid the bayou is the reason that they're canceling the festival. All their resources are going toward that. These are really fast, fun, open-ended prompts that you can create. Lots of opportunities to tell different kinds of stories, to look at connective tissue that makes up your world. And the longer you spend sort of gazing into these prompts and looking at ways to connect them, I think the more and more depth you'll find. And the depth really comes from the way the cards talk to each other and ladder up, and the way that you connect the prompts to make a bigger cohesive story or a tapestry that really explains the location.